Welcome to our first episode of Leadership Language. We've created this podcast series to bring you inspiring conversations with a broad range of leaders about the power of communication. We talk candidly to our guests about leadership styles, success, moments of learning, the uncomfortable situations, and the courageous conversations that follow. Importantly, we discuss self-awareness and how vital it is for our future success. This week, our Managing Director, Sheena Ireland, speaks with Carrie-Ann Leeson, Chief Executive Officer of Lifeline Canberra. Carrie is a firm believer in listening and says it's the key to successful leadership. Grab a cuppa, sit back and learn more about the leadership language of Carrie-Ann Leeson.
Hi, Carrie. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'm delighted to have you, Carrie. You're one of the best leaders I know. You inspire me a lot. And I know you've had such a diverse and varied career, including now as the CEO of Lifeline Canberra, an organisation very dear to my heart. Carrie, just to start us off, I'd love it if you could describe your leadership style and in particular, how does communication fit in with that?
It's so important, I think, not to maintain or sustain one type of leadership approach. And in any given situation, I think you do need to adapt your leadership style. I know it was so important to be consistent. Many years ago, people would say, you need to be consistent as a leader. But really, I think scenario-based, and certainly in this role, it is important to adapt your leadership style to the situation. And I think you can still be authentic in that process, but I think it's important to adapt your style. So certainly, for example, when COVID struck just a few months ago, we were in between this unknown virus threat and the bushfire season, that required a pulling together of the team and a command and control leadership style. So it was really about delivering facts and figures, information more readily and more often than you would usually, and probably a little less listening at that point in time, which is a very important communication skill that I apply in every other day type scenarios.
Yeah, I think that's a really important one too, Carrie. And I love that you describe that because often we do have this perception that, again, leadership has to be, consistent. And there's consistency to a degree, but life is uncertain and, life happens. And this year is more true of that than ever before. And so I really like the example you just said, because I've seen you as a very, listening and inclusive leader. And it's not to say when you're in that command and control space, you're not. But yes, exactly. When it is, when their times are uncertain, people need more information, they need more direction, they need more decisions, and so that becomes a really important skill.
Yeah, you've got to understand what your people need. Their feelings drive their thoughts drive their behaviours, and in a world where you're trying to run an operation, you're trying to align with strategy, and certainly in our line of work, you're trying to do something that's really quite sensitive, serious and heavy in terms of content. It's important that you're setting people up to feel good, so that their behaviours match that. And that's obviously the best outcome then for the community that we're in, but also the organisation that we're leading.
Such an important thing. And as you mentioned, you do deal in an area that is quite heavy, but like you also said, you've got to set people up for success and to be happy at the same time. So it's such an interesting dynamic that you play within and you do it really well.
Oh, thank you.
Carrie, you again have had quite a big leadership career before you even came to Lifeline. Is there a key moment in your leadership career that helped shape your focus on communication?
I think there have been many. I have learnt most of what I know and what I apply in my role in this organisation and others by what I've seen. So I tend to lead myself into situations and I tend to love being around inspirational people. So if someone's doing something in a way that aligns with my values and my head and my heart, I will observe. Theory is useful in terms of frameworks for sense making and communicating, certainly to certain types of people. But what I respond to is actually seeing it play out in action and actually seeing the consequences of certain behaviors. So many times along my career and certainly my life, I've been so fortunate to be inspired. I think in Canberra, we're in a concentration in terms of inspirational people, and that could be anything from politics through to business, through to sports, arts, culture. There are people everywhere in every cafe. But growing up, obviously, in a country, South Africa, that was led through a very tumultuous time by Nelson Mandela, watching that dignity and grace play out in what possibly could have been the most emotionally fueled problem. He just managed it so well with so much compassion. And then on a smaller scale, I guess in a day-to-day, I have worked alongside some leaders who know that a tough conversation needs to happen. They don't avoid having that tough conversation, but they know if you go into it with respect, if you go into it with a genuine love of people, then it's going to be the best possible outcome. It may not be a great outcome, but if you go into a tough conversation and you don't avoid having a tough conversation, you're going to leave someone better than you found them. So that's what I've observed. It's all through observation.
Yeah, and what great things you've been able to observe in your life, I guess, that have brought you here as well. And I like that you mentioned there the courageous conversations that people sort of need to have. And in what is a quite fast-paced world that we're living in, often those courageous conversations can fall off and people don't necessarily have them because times move, but it creates ripple effects and problems down the track. So in this fast-paced world, you know, we can all forget some of the fundamentals of communication. What helps you maintain that focus on communication when even now, let's be honest, this year is moving so quickly and so with such uncertainty?
I think to be part of any conversation, it's not about simply talking. You've got to know, and you've got to have the self-awareness to know whether you're going to add value by being a part of that communication. And sometimes being a valuable part of that communication means not talking. We're so quick to react and want to respond or want to fix a situation that we don't stop to listen. And listening is probably the key communication skill, certainly something that you learn, as you would have, through Lifeline and the training. But quite often that's how you add value, is through listening first and not reacting, not feeling the need to respond or reply straight away. And I think that's a skill and certainly a key communication skill that is often lacking at this time. People are anxious. Again, their thoughts, their feelings, driving behaviours, they're very quick to act. And it's just a reminder that you've got to be self-aware enough to know how you're going to add value. And so often that's just through listening.
I think that's an amazing point. And as you said, Carrie, you know, listening is a major skill that we learn at Lifeline Canberra, particularly when we're on the phones. And, you know, for anyone listening, you know, it's difficult when you're on a phone to make an assumption. You know, you can't make an assumption. You can't see someone. You don't know their history. You don't know anything other than what they're saying. So listening becomes that really fundamental skill in communication. For people listening, if they sort of do have that self-awareness moment now where they think, okay, am I really listening, and how do I refine my listening skills? Have you got any tips for them?
Seeing the benefits first of listening. So stopping and what that allows you to do, I think, is the first point. So why would you not react or respond if you feel like you've got something worth saying? In an emotionally fueled situation, I think stopping to listen just gives literally the physiological, the science behind it gives that amygdala hijacking, or it gives that brain, the lizard brain, that opportunity just to calm, for the adrenaline to subside, and for obviously your higher level thinking, or that part of the brain, to take hold. So in any given situation that is emotionally fueled, and I'm referring only to those conversations because we're all good at having the fun ones, I think it's important to acknowledge that you need to give yourself at least a minute or two before you're able to respond in a non-emotional capacity. And I think emotions can often be valuable. Emotions are something that we need to feel. But if you are inclined to have emotional conversations, you may well say things and do things that you may not necessarily mean to say in the moment. So I think it's important to understand the benefits of listening, and often that's all that listening gives you a chance to do, is to hear the other person out, to remove any preconceived ideas, to challenge any assumptions that you may have had going in. You may surprise yourself, but you're also giving yourself time to overcome that emotional physiological response and form a really thoughtful reply.
I think that's amazing. And what it does is really lead into our next question and kind of, you know, answers that in some way. And I'd be interested to hear more on that, which is, as a leader, you know, you're under scrutiny from both inside and outside an organisation at any one time, and particularly in an organisation where you are dealing with sensitive issues. You're dealing with an issue that touches everyone in the community, so everyone has a say about it. How do you maintain a focus on that listening and removing assumptions and everything within that when, you know, let's be honest, it can feel like people just want to twist your words for their own agenda?
Yes. It's only happened a couple of times this week. Look, I think it comes down to, I would probably go back a few steps. What can you control in there in terms of what people's agendas are and what they're trying to achieve? And just, again, appreciating that I don't think anyone sets out to harm, but certainly it can be a consequence, intended or unintended, of what they're doing. What I do is I manage my well-being as best I can. I make sure that I am always prepared and my well-being is as good as it can be to have any conversation at any time. And I think whether you're a leader of an organisation that is 5, 10, 500, 5,000 people, that's what you need to be, is constantly prepared to go anywhere. You may not be prepared emotionally to have a specific conversation with a specific team member, but that may be when they are feeling courageous enough to have the conversation with you. So I don't think it's about necessarily worrying about people twisting your words. I think it's about being in the best possible position and being in optimum well-being anyway in terms of your emotional, psychosocial space, to be able to engage in any conversation, any content, to truly be present with someone and to give them the time that they need and to try and leave them better than you find them. Quite often people just need to be heard or they need to be validated. And if you understand that that's the need that's coming through and you can change that thought, leave them feeling better, because people often don't remember what you did. They remember how you made them feel.
So true.
So if nothing else, it's just about being prepared to have any conversation at any time.
Carrie, that's amazing advice that I'm sure everyone can take away. And I love that you always talk about, you know, leaving things better than you found them, leaving people better than you found them. And that's such a thing that Lifeline does, that you do. It comes, you know, from the top down and everyone who's in this organisation. I just want to finish sort of in leverage of something you said there, which I think is really important. And Lifeline Canberra and you talk about self-care a lot, you know, and putting yourself in the best position to go out into the world, to have conversations, to do the work you do. And often in social media land or anything like that, those messages of self-care can be lost and people think, well, yeah, I don't have time actually, and how important is it? But it is quite a vital thing. I'd love just to give any tips on how people can really remember that self-care is that vital thing that actually sets each individual up for success.
I'll let you in on a secret.
I love it.
I don't actually like the word self-care. It is overutilized. Yeah. It tends to lend itself to something of a menu that you tick. And true. I think it removes the impression or the importance of having it as natural as brushing your teeth. I think you need to constantly be checking in with yourself.
Yes.
How are you going? How are you feeling? How are the people around you going? What's important to you? You need to consistently be, cleansing and rejuvenating and restoring yourself. And for everyone, that's so different. Yes. If you're an introvert, if you're an extrovert, if you've got children, if you don't, if you have family who live in town, if you don't, everyone is so complex in their own right and so unique. So it may not be simply as easy as saying turn the kettle on or go for a walk. For some people, the complexities, their life experiences, etc., have left them with a lot more in terms of emotional challenges. There's things that you can do and steps that you can take, but I think it's so important to check in with yourself, to stay connected. And for me, it's really about loving what you do. I don't feel like I've worked a day in my life.
Yeah.
And that's because I've been so fortunate enough to do things I love with people I love. I'm surrounded by people that I love, and that is my self-care. So even though the content is difficult and challenging at Lifeline, I think, and in anyone's life, there are always challenges. Life happens to us. And I think the most important thing to remember is that happiness and joy, it's not the absence of pain. It's not the absence of trauma or tension. It's the inclusion of all of those things.
Yes.
And growing as a result. You don't know what you're learning when you're learning it, but we're on a learning curve at the moment, aren't we?
Yes.
We're always learning and we're always growing and we're always evolving. And I think how we look after ourselves and how we look after others needs to continue to evolve too. So I wouldn't say one or two things work for me. I'm always seeking out. I'm like a ferret. I'm always looking for new ways to care for myself, but also to show other people that I care.
That's amazing, Carrie. What an amazing way to end this podcast. And thank you so much for coming on today, sharing all of your thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for our Leadership Language podcast. We hope you've been inspired by Carrie's story and perhaps gained some new ideas on how to refine and improve your leadership style. We'd love you to tune in next fortnight when we'll be speaking to Claire Gunning, Head of Government Relations and Partnerships at the Business Council of Australia. Until next time.